Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our third edition of Bacardi Talks. I'm incredibly excited today to have the restaurateur of restaurateurs joining us. Just a couple of housekeeping items we need to take care of, and we'll get this incredible show on the road. We are live and we are recording this. Later on, we'll have opportunities to have some questions from students, and if there are any chat students, we have things coming in, we're going to do our best to answer back to you via chat. Our questions that are already prearranged and going to be live for Drew as well. But before we get going, let's hear from our favorite dean, Dr. Michael Chang. Dean Chang, sir.
Thank you, Professor Connors. Thank you so much. Good afternoon again, and welcome to the FIU Chaplin School of Hospitality and Tourism Management's Bacardi Talks, hosted by the Bacardi Center of Excellence at the Chaplin School. You've just heard from Professor Brian Connors, our faculty director, and he has organized a whole bunch of events from the Bacardi Center of Excellence. Brian will be sharing with you some of what they do at the Center of Excellence. I want to start by thanking the Bacardi family and the Bacardi North America leadership for their support of our Chaplin School. It is because of Bacardi's $5 million gift and their belief and alignment with our values that we're able to co-create this Bacardi Center of Excellence. So you see, Bacardi truly believes in supporting and elevating our hospitality industry. They've generously shared the talent, the expertise, and the assets with all, not just us, but with everybody during this time and also continuously going forward. They've shared their research with on-premise operators on what is necessary to stock their bars with as we continue to reopen during this time. Clearly, they're not doing this just for themselves, but they're practicing the ethos of fearless family and founders. We're very pleased to be partnering with them. Now, again, back to you, Professor Connors. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dean Chang. Always a pleasure. Hopefully someday I'll be able to see you face to face. But in the meantime, we're going to have a great time today. A couple quick things on the Bacardi Center of Excellence. As Dean Chang mentioned, we have a fantastic dynamic partnership with Bacardi North America. We've launched Bacardi Teach with over now 1,600 courses taken to help out people during these challenging times. Our third edition of Bacardi Talks, and more to come down the road. And of course, if you have any questions whatsoever about our spirits management track or the beverage program, feel free to reach out to me directly at bconnors@fiu.edu, and we'll definitely help you out however we can. So let's get into the nuts and bolts today. I gave you a great hint before. I know we've done a lot with social media to get this program going here, but I literally think we have the restaurateur of restaurateurs today. We have the foodie king today. Drew, I got to quote you on this one real quick because, of course, doing my light stalking to get prepared for you, it was a real restaurateur lives it, breathes it, eats it. You work your way up from the bottom and you never stop. Ladies and gentlemen, let me quickly introduce, we'll talk a little bit more about his fantastic career, what's ahead for us in the future, a little bit about the wine industry, and some great student questions. Mr. Drew Nieporent, how are you, sir?
Doing fantastic, Brian. Thank you very much.
You look great, my friend. And now, think back when we saw each other last South Beach Food and Wine Festival. I'm tracking you down, again, lightly stalking at the North venue saying, Drew, we got to do something. You're like, whatever you need as you're trying to eat a cheeseburger and keep your miles going at the same time.
Was that at the Fontainebleau?
Down on the main beach. So that's
the burger patch.
Yeah, when you come in early, I'm always, and I'm really got to recognize you a lot. I'm like, hey, Drew, I know you. How are you, sir? So it's great. Yes. So Drew, thank you so much for joining us today. As our numbers come up and people start to join us today, we're going to have a great conversation. So as kind of I hinted to it, we'd love to hear a little bit more. I'm going to call it these, your early years, your hustle. You have a great background in hospitality. You went to my alma mater, your alma mater, a few of us on this call as well. I like to say we did a bid together up at Ithaca, New York. But I'd love to talk a little bit more about that after Cornell, and you did time on cruise ships. Believe it or not, so did I. I did training sommeliers around the world. In cruise ships into Tavern on the Green. You were a hustler. I mean, literally a hustler before you opened up your first restaurant in 1985. You mind talking a little bit about those years and kind of what drove you that direction?
Yeah, I think, so much derives from your mother and father, your parents sort of guide you in a certain way. My mother was an actress, and my father worked for the State Liquor Authority. And of course, the State Liquor Authority, they license restaurants. So as a kid, literally my first memories, my father had a way of making the application go from the bottom of the pile to the top of the pile. So the restaurateurs would invite us in, and we pretty much be eating on the arm there. Some of the greatest restaurants in New York, and these are people that were right off the boat. So you have to understand, I had this exposure to all different types of restaurants at a very early age, and I decided very early on, I was very focused that this is what I was going to do. But I was a product of public schools in New York City. So getting into Cornell, I wasn't a great student. I went to Stuyvesant High School, which is a great high school, but I wasn't a great student. So getting into Cornell was an achievement. I don't know how I got in, but let's just call it geographic. They needed somebody from New York. So, I spent the 4 years at Cornell, and I think Cornell back then, unfortunately, it wasn't the institution it is today. Back then, it did have a fantastic reputation, but there were a lot of missing parts, Brian. There were a lot of, I found that the School of Hotel Administration, of course, and then there was the School of Hard Knocks. The School of Hard Knocks was going out and finding practical experiences where you could build your confidence. And, and when I was at Cornell, and I've spoken about this, there was a professor named Vance Christian, who was larger than life guy.
Absolutely.
And, sometimes in life, it's like two little things, or somebody says something, but it really resonates. And what he had said was, you need to derive professional knowledge, and then you have to have the confidence in that knowledge. And this is very basic, but it's like, it's really sort of primed me for the whole life. When you give a directive for somebody to do something, you got to know, deep down that, you would do it yourself. And, you're looking at the person and they believe in you. So anyway, I had this education at Cornell, and when I graduated, I had no job. I had interviewed with Rock Resorts because I thought that was very sexy, and that would have been a great thing to do. No. Westin International, no. And Hyatt, I had no job. So in New York City, I had worked one summer at a place called Maxwell's Plum, First Avenue, 64th Street, very busy restaurant. And they hired me for $300 a week, assistant restaurant director. But what you have to understand, it was a proving ground. I mean, we would do 500 dinners a night on 250 seats. The place was jammed all the time, a very robust bar in the middle of the spot, very ornate restaurant, fantastic food. And, all the staff there was, it's like a band of gypsies. So there I derived a tremendous education. And it was a proving grounds. And then one day, I get an opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. to become the director of food service, the United States Senate dining rooms. And I was very into politics. I still am. And, I interviewed for the job, and they showed me in Washington where my office was going to be. And I was ready to go. And Warner Leroy, who owned Maxwell's Plum, was about to open the Tavern on the Green. And they sat me down. They said, "You're going to go to Tavern on the Green." I said, no, I'm going to Washington. But the general manager of the Tavern on the Green, a guy named Hugo Rowley, who actually owns Gibson's in Chicago, he said, no, I know the guy in Washington. It's okay. You're going to work for us at Tavern on the Green. And they basically, the fix was in. I had to go to work at Tavern on the Green. But guess what? It was another proving grounds. Because there we would do, 1,000 dinners on a Saturday night and wake up and do 1,500 brunches on a Sunday morning. So it's this professional knowledge that you need to derive. And, when you work for somebody else, you can make very good money. We had profit sharing there and whatever. But they basically did something underhanded, a little bit underhanded. And I wound up leaving Tavern on the Green. After 4 years, I worked there for about 4 years. The place was doing $35 million when I left, and we really had done a tremendous job there. But when I graduated Cornell, all my classmates were, I thought you're going to open your own restaurant. I thought you're going to open, and now it's year after year and nothing's happening. So anyway, I started to train for the New York Marathon. It's 1983, and I'm jogging in New York City, and I see this neighborhood called Tribeca. And, it's very quiet down there. And Sundays I would read the New York Times, and there was business opportunities. And there in the business opportunities, a tiny little paragraph that says 1,500 square feet for $1,500 a month, West Broadway, Tribeca. So I jogged down there. I saw the spot, $1,500 a month. I said, well, I guess I can afford that. I spoke to all the people who had given me lip service about investing in a restaurant if I ever decided to open my own restaurant. Every single one of them said no. So I wound up taking $50,000 of my earnings, $50,000 of a fellow classmate from Cornell's earnings, and $50,000 from the Small Business Administration, because Ronald Reagan was giving loans back then. And with $150,000, I started building my first restaurant called Montrachet, in which, after 7 weeks of being in business, got 3 stars in the New York Times. So think about this. You get 3 stars, you're 29 years old, it's your first restaurant, and now it's stormed the Bastille. I mean, I could have filled Shea Stadium. The phone is, this is before social media, so the phone is ringing off the hook. And I have a chef who cooks beautiful food. There's just one problem. He can't get the food out of the kitchen. So there's a wait of 45 minutes to an hour. And the people, where's my food? Where's my food? So here I have 3 stars. I could fill Shea Stadium. I'm turning away all kinds of business, and I'm pissing off a lot of people. So anyway, the bottom line is we had to make a change there after 13 months, and we did. And that restaurant went for 22 years. It's been reconverted to Corton, which also got 3 stars. And they made a movie about that chef. And then for the last 6 years, it's Bâtard. So I've had my first restaurant, I still have 35 years later. It's always been 3 stars. So, that's one of the coolest things, about this business is like, you come from a certain place, you have to have the training, you have to have the experience, but then you hold on to the first one, and then all the rest of your dreams sort of emanate out of that first one.
Drew, you definitely have the Midas touch of creating phenomenal restaurant brands that have staying power. I mean, you're being very modest, but you had those, 3 New York Times stars for over 20 years. Right. Your restaurants have been named James Beard Restaurants of the Year. I mean, this is no slouch here. But I got to bring this up, and I have a feeling this is also coming from, your childhood and your mom, but I love your theory of theater of restaurants. And how does that still, work, for how you created Tribeca Grill, Nobu, but the theater of restaurants? If you don't mind talking about that, because I love your overall philosophy on it.
Okay, well, first of all, when you're first starting out and you don't have a pot to piss in and you have no money, you basically, build the restaurant. It's got 4 walls. There's no paintings on the wall. And the food critics come in and they say, I love the minimalist look of the place, which is the minimalist look of the place. That wasn't intentional. We had no money. We couldn't put anything. Anyway, so, what happens? Down the block, guy comes in for dinner. His name is Robert De Niro, and he likes to sit all the way in the back with his back to the room, and he's not very communicative. And then one day his girlfriend, who's very vivacious and lively, she says, Bob wants to know if you'd like to open another restaurant in New York City. And you go, are you talking to me? Because there's nobody else here. And then,
that's a good joke. That's a good joke.
I'm glad you got it. And then we go up the block and we look at this former coffee shop, Martinson Coffee, big space, have this opportunity. And he pulls in Bill Murray, Sean Penn, Mikhail Baryshnikov, Christopher Walken. Have I dropped enough names? Ed Harris, a bunch of people, Harvey Weinstein. So anyway, now I have the opportunity and a budget to create the ambience. And now remember, I talked to you about Maxwell's Plum. There has never been a restaurant more resplendent, more 3-ring circus in New York City than Maxwell's Plum, until Tavern on the Green, which unfortunately they knocked it down, but the Crystal Room at the Tavern on the Green was a glass enclosed room with unbelievable chandeliers. That was probably the most beautiful room in New York City. So theater, even when I was a young kid and my father and mother were taking me out to these restaurants, I saw the ballet of the whole thing, the waiters and the movement and all the different interiors, and even places that had minimal decor still struck me as theater, because some of the lighting in some of these places was really exquisite. And remember, restaurants are where people take their dates and to romance them, and my mother being an actress, there was a theatricality that we grew up with because of her profession. And I saw that in the restaurant business. I just found it to be a sexy business. And then what happened in the generation that I grew up in, restaurants went from just four walls to theatrical productions with the David Rockwells and the Adam Tahanis and the Sam Lapatas and all these interior designers creating these beautiful places. And think about this. Sometimes you go into a restaurant, you look in, it's beautiful, and you go, I really want to eat here one day, yet you've never had anything to eat. You don't even know who the chef is, but because the place is so exquisite, you want to go there. So the point is, it's great to stack the deck. It's great that you have a beautiful interior, knock, who's there, and then just make sure that you have great food and great service. And I would just say this, when I judge my own self, I realize that the reason my restaurants have had staying power, because Tribeca Grill, for instance, which opened in 1990, this year celebrated 30 years. My first restaurant is still operating 35 years later. And Nobu, which we could talk about for the whole session if we wanted to, is now 26 years, and there's 50 Nobus around the world. But the bottom line to all these restaurants is they all have a foundation of great food and great service, because of why? The fish stinks from the head. And it's a sweet smelling fish so far.
I love that. I can let you go all day. So there's no doubt whatsoever, Drew, that you have a keen eye for spotting talent in the culinary world. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But, the Wall Street Journal about a year ago also called you the wine world's most influential amateur. I remember reading this article going, wow, they're absolutely right. Because, we do have a phenomenal beverage program at the Chaplin School. And it says, you are one of the best talent scouts out there for the wine world. If you don't mind, Drew, talk a little bit about, I know you have, and you've created master somms, you've created these phenomenal wine-focused, also value-driven wine-focused restaurants. But if you don't, what's that eye? What's that talent scout eye that you have?
It's interesting because I talked about my mother being an actress. When she stopped being an actress, guess what? She became a casting director. What does a casting director do? The casting director has to find the person to fit the role of the commercial. So you have to have an innate ability to put somebody, a round peg into a square hole, whatever the expression is. I think you have to know talent. Let's just say you're a sports scout and you're watching basketball. Some people can watch somebody and they realize there's a certain je ne sais quoi, that this person has the talent. They send these scouts to the Dominican Republic, to Puerto Rico, to find, the great major leaguers. In the food business, I made it my business to go everywhere, read everything, know about everyone. And then I also attended a lot of these food festivals, which really became very important because, when you leave your own kitchen and you see the other chefs from all different parts of the country, you learn about their personality and about the way they work. And so you see the person behind all the hype and the fanfare, and you learn so much. Now, in terms of wine, what you have to understand, in New York, nobody really cared about wine except the highfalutin French restaurants, and all they served were French wines. There was one restaurant, fantastic restaurant, and unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, the Four Seasons, which promoted California wines. Before I opened Montrachet, I wanted to open the quintessential American restaurant. And actually, before Montrachet, which was the name of the first restaurant, of course, the name of the restaurant was the Silverado Trail. Because, of course, the Silverado Trail in Napa Valley, gorgeous. And I was so turned on by Napa Valley and the wines that, I wanted to do a wine-centric restaurant. But I was working as a captain at La Grenouille. At one point, it was a 4-star French restaurant in New York City. And one night, a customer ordered Le Montrachet, Louis Latour Le Montrachet, beautiful label. And as I'm pouring this majestic bottle of wine, I'm looking at the bottle and it's green, gold, gorgeous. And I'm thinking, Montrachet. And I left the Silverado Trail and I opened Montrachet with David Boulay, who was an American chef, but had worked at Robuchon and Roger Verger and Paul Bocuse, and fantastic. I mean, the food was fantastic. 35 years later, I don't think New York has food as good as this, except Boulay, but Boulay's closed his restaurant. So anyway, now we started with a 60 wine list. 60 wines, that's it. But they were carefully chosen by me. And half were California and half were French. And they were very well priced. To give you an idea, Puligny Montrachet then was $34. Today, it's at least $134. I don't think you can find a white Burgundy for less than $100 anywhere in America. But anyway, so Montrachet, when we opened, also had a 16, that's 1-6, 3-course meal. Because I had been to France in 1984, I'd eaten at Germain, Joel Robuchon's 3-star restaurant, and they had 185 franc luncheon, which at the time, 10 francs to the dollar was $18.50. And I said, if he can do it for $18.50, I can do it for $16. Now think about this. I got 3 stars with a $16 menu, but we also had the 60 bottle wine list. And there was a tremendous interest. And a guy by the name of Daniel Jonas, who he and I had worked together at the Plaza Athénée, he came to me and he said, listen, I speak fluent French. I have an interest in wine. Let me help you with the wine program. And we worked 20 years together at Montrachet. And he developed Tim Kopek. And there were so many people that came out of Montrachet. And Montrachet went from a 60-bottle wine list to a grand award from the Wine Spectator. And in fact, Brian, at one point, I had 3 restaurants, Rubicon in San Francisco, Montrachet, and Tribeca Grill. Tribeca Grill, to this day, maintains its Grand Award wine list from the Wine Spectator. But back then, I had 3 restaurants, and there were only 80 in America, and I had 3 restaurants designated with the Grand Award, not the Award of Excellence, the Grand Award. The point being is that we evolved the wine program, and now wine is... There's not a restaurant in New York City that doesn't have a wine director or a beverage director or a sommelier. And by the way, in New York, there were no sommeliers in the 70s and the 80s or the 90s. And, sommelier is a French term, so I didn't even like using that word. But now they wear it proudly. The point being is the outgrowth of my restaurants having these great wine programs with a childhood friend of mine. In 2000, I think we opened in 2006. On 57th Street, we opened Crush Wines and Spirits, a wine store, liquor store, that to this day does unbelievable. Even in the pandemic, we're doing tremendous business. So my career has been very much about finding the wine talent. Currently, Daniel Jung at Tribeca Grill is a tremendous somm. Jason Jacobite at Bâtard, tremendous somm. David Gordon and I have worked together since the 80s. He sort of oversees everything. So, I mean, that's the other thing I'll point out to you, which is, I'm 65 now. I started owning my own restaurants when I was 29. The whole thing is keeping on great relations with everybody, the chefs, the staff, the sommeliers, and that's the thing that I feel most gratifying. That forget about, the fact that my restaurants are still open is magnificent, but the reality of working with these people and they have respect for you and you have respect for them, and that's where it begins and ends. That's the very good point.
I love that, and thank you for doing so much for the wine industry as a recovering sommelier myself and now just a wine educator. But I did have to have one of those titles for a little while.
Where'd you work?
At the beloved Clark Cookhouse. I know my chef, Brian Halloran's on here as well. So we got to give a plug for Chef Halloran. Remember Brian from the Statler, and that's how I wound up there. But of course, everything else. But this is more about you, Drew. And, we got to get into the meat and potatoes here.
Okay.
Because everybody wants to know, and I know we had some pre-calls and some pre-conversations with people. Hey, Drew, let's talk a little bit about the current state of hospitality in the restaurant industry as a whole. And, we can take this in many different directions, but I'm going to be very, very blunt. Drew, are we going to be okay at the end of this? Are restaurants and hospitality, are we going to be okay?
Honestly, I think it's going to depend on where you are in the country. I think without the PPP funds that we got, all my restaurants got, I don't think we could have made it. So I think the PPP, even though it was poorly defined, when they extended it to 24 weeks, that's gotten us through a certain period. I knew that I sort of had a time frame in mind, but in New York, they haven't even allowed us to have people indoors until 6 days ago. And the PPP,
at 25% too, right?
Right, and 25%. Yeah. What I've seen is that the restaurant industry, I mean, it's unbelievable. They've innovated. They've done things. I mean, in the street are all these man-made, outdoor dining things. Now, in New York, they used to kill you. You needed a permit to put a table outside. Now, one day you go online, boom, 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 and they're encouraging it. And that's a good thing. And everyone hates Mayor de Blasio, but I'll tell you the truth. That is something he's done that has really been helpful. Okay. But, depending upon the restaurant, we're just not equipped to be outside. And then when I saw the weather changing, I said, we got to move inside. And I called de Blasio and, because of course you can just call the mayor. So of course you can. That's a lucky thing. But I spoke to the chief of staff, very receptive. And then one day I'm on the street and the phone rings and it's Bill de Blasio. He's calling directly, and we spoke for 15 minutes. And I could tell he didn't want to do a thing I told him. He was like, and I said, Bill, I was on your side. I wanted to wait this thing out. But in Long Island, Rockland County, Westchester, Connecticut, and I could go on, they've been dining indoors since July. At least give us a shot at this thing, which he's done. And if it doesn't work, you can shut us down, which they've done in Brooklyn and Queens, a couple of places, because there have been outbreaks. So to answer your question, we have a fighting chance, but that's all we have. The economics in the restaurant business are bad even at 100%. And now keep in mind, I've run my restaurants 30 years, 26 years, 14 years, blah, 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 blah. And is this going to be the end of the road? Well, I'm trying for it not to be. I'm struggling so that I can get to early next year. And here's my prediction, and I really believe this. And I don't want to offend anybody politically, however you think. I believe in intelligence. I listen to everybody. If somebody's conservative, right wing, if they're intelligent, I'm going to listen to every word they have to say. But we have to get rid of the current guy. Have to. And just that alone is going to bring a renaissance to the way people feel. And I really believe this. And that we're going to move into early next year, like January, February, with some vaccines, some remedies. Know what I see? I see people want to go out. They want to go out, but they want to be safe. And even at this late juncture, so far down the road, what have we been saying? We're saying the same things. Wear the mask, socially distance, wash your hands. This is no mystery. But there has to be enough data. And in New York, where they got it down to 1%, I could only believe, and it's been down very low, whereas the rest of the country is seeing outbreaks everywhere because stupid people are not listening to smart people, that I really believe we have a fighting chance. But I can't speak for the whole country. I speak to, my ex-chefs in San Francisco, but San Francisco has beautiful weather, so they can dine outside. In New York, we have the luxury of having a great September and so far an excellent October. But it's getting cold. Like today, it's 64 degrees here in New York. And so, my chef is, can we buy heaters? Like that, there isn't a remedy to every problem in dining out. Eventually, the people have to eat inside, even at a quarter capacity. So I'm still of the belief that we have a chance to fight back. I'm not, optimistic. I'm not deluding myself. And luckily, you're looking at somebody who's 65 years old. I've had a great career. If it all were to end tomorrow, guess what? If that's the way it's going to be, that's the way it's going to be. I'm resigned to that. But honestly, I just feel I've never seen the restaurant business think on its toes. Now, I'm going to point something out to you. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of spokespeople in our industry, a lot of very influential people who are doing a lot of stupid things. And here's what I'll explain. You asked me to come on, I came on. But during this whole pandemic, nobody wants my advice. The new generation wants to write about the new generation restaurants, and nobody cares that, you've had a restaurant for 30 years? Really? And it's fine, because I've just shut
Drew,
my
my friend, we care. There you go.
I just shut my mouth. But the one thing I've heard, and this is the stupidest argument I've ever heard, which is, we can't go back to the old ways. Tipping came out of slavery. You hear these things, it's so wrong. And they have this bully pulpit, and they're influencing a certain group of people, very prominent restaurateurs. You know what? My entire career, I have never, and I mean this, had a waiter come up to me and said, I make too much money. Do the waiters make more money than the cooks? Yes. So I advise every cook, be a waiter, if that's the problem. Or if you want to remedy the situation, if you want to have parity where the wages are equal in the front and the back of the house, you know what you do? Then you lobby for your ability to put the gratuity on the check, and for your ability to be able to split with the front and the back of the house. But guess what? Depending upon where you are in America, you can't do it. It's against the law. So
that's a phenomenal segue for us right there, Drew. If you don't mind, because hey, first of all, I like it when I got your New York up. That was pretty good. I was like, right. All right, here we go, baby. Hey, one of your friends, Miss Elizabeth Blau from Las Vegas, is going to join us real quick here. Elizabeth, darling, are you there?
Elizabeth. She's muted.
She's somewhere.
I watched Elizabeth on your.
Oh, good. Yeah, she's wonderful. So she heard you were coming on as well. She says, I have to come on and say hello. But also,
Drew, Brian.
There we go. There we go. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Listen, the great thing about Elizabeth is she's just so smart. She knows where all the bodies are buried. Elizabeth, how you doing? You okay?
There she is. All right, here we go.
Okay. One day we just have to have an hour of Elizabeth telling Steve Wynn stories. That's all we have to have.
All right, how about Serial Macchione story?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Well, it's an honor to be on, and I was listening to everything you said. Kim and I are in Santa Barbara.
I was like, wait a minute, you're at the beach. What the heck, Elizabeth? Hey, it's good to see you.
Brian has a fake background.
Yes,
I have a real background.
Yeah, Brian's got Tribeca, though.
There you go.
I was delighted to be on because I just did a webinar with your brother, who's another wise man, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think it's not just restaurateurs, Drew. It's the whole country. Like, we're focusing on the wrong things. Like, let's just focus on what is gonna, save people and families, and making sure there's food on the table for people. And we're not even talking about another stimulus, and I'm with you. If we didn't have the PPP, we would be closed right now. So let's figure out how to get another round. And
right, definitely.
So anyway, sending lots of love to everybody.
Thank you.
Good.
You know,
Good. Enjoy.
and
Thank
also,
you, Elizabeth.
it's like when you hear these people, they say, I'm going to no tipping. Okay. Now keep in mind, Danny Meyer went to no tipping 5 years ago. Guess what? During this thing, he said no.
Yeah.
Got to go back to tipping. But then he signed on to this one fair wage. I have no problem with one fair wage. The only problem I have is going to cost me $250,000 in my smallest restaurant a year if I have to pay everybody, the front of the house staff who are making tips, the $5 an hour times $8 a day times 40 hours a week. The math is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. So what Elizabeth just said, and what I believe is this, that I've dedicated my entire career to the restaurant business. The problems we can solve. It's always when the people from the outside somehow come in and tell us what to do. And the people that say, well, I've gone to no tipping. And then you drill down and they have 6 employees.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Nobu, I'm just going to make this as easy as possible. In New York City, landlords like to charge percentage rent, 8%, 10% of gross sales, okay? If you go to no tipping at a $20 million restaurant, let's say $20 million restaurant, you're gonna add $2 million to the 20 million. So you're gonna raise your prices to cover that 20%, okay? I'm sorry, it's 4 million. 1/5 of 20 is 4. $4 million, okay? So your gross is not 20 million, it's 24 million. So when the landlord takes 10%, that 4 million, which you don't even see, you just put it on your bill to pay the waiters, the one fair wage, which by the way will be less than tipping, 10%, 8%, 9%, 10% of the rent of that 4 million is 400,000. You mean to tell me I'm gonna pay the landlord another $400,000 because of my stupidity? It's insane. And you never hear this argument. You never hear it. And look, I was smart. I was in Tribeca. I drove the beast to the honey. My first restaurant, my rent was $3,500 a month. Okay, $100 a day. Now it's, you know, they forced us out of Tribeca, the Nobu. We were paying $750,000 for rent. The space has been empty for 4 years. Mm. I don't have to be right. I just have to, I just don't want to be stupid. Yep. There are so many stupid people. Be smart. Yep. That's the key element. Be smart.
Listen to Uncle Drew, ladies and gentlemen. Listen to Uncle Drew. Yeah, that's it. You know, Drew, so this is a good segue again for us here to get some student questions. You know, you had a chance to kind of say hello earlier. And really get their perspective, because I like, you know, again, you're the restaurateur of restaurateurs and everything you say is making sense. You really got to look, we're a nickel and dime business. And if you're not watching all these nickels and dimes, you know, you're going to lose it. You know, and for those students that are watching and listening now and have taken restaurant management, they hear me say that over and over again. So you have to watch every nickel and dime like a crazed person. Otherwise, you're going to lose it. But well spoken. So thank you for that. So let's ask our first student to join us, Rebecca. If you can join us with your question for Drew, that'd be amazing.
Hi, Drew. Thanks so much for being with us today. So I'm a junior at the Chaplin School of Hospitality, and I'm always looking for new experiences, and I really want to get my foot in the door. Recently, I've become very interested in the restaurant and bar industry, and I was wondering, do you have an internship program at the Myriad Group? And if you do you have any advice for students who are looking to apply to the internship?
Yes, yeah, you know, Tribeca, as I've stated, is 30 years now. And we do have a structured program for both interns and a management, MIA, management and training program as well. I've hired a number of culinary students, not only from Cornell, but from FIU as well. So this is the most important thing I can impart to you, is that coming out of college, get good work experience. Get a job that really puts your feet to the fire in a successful restaurant, in a busy restaurant, which gives you the opportunity to manage people and to test your own skills. You know, the key element is, you know, and I said it very early on, it's the professional knowledge that you have and the confidence. And confidence is not fake confidence. It's not false confidence. If you're knowledgeable about something, if you can speak forthrightly about something, about our industry, then that's really important. So yeah, Nobu doesn't have an internship, which it should, because we have so many Nobus around the world. But the great thing is that in restaurants like Nobu, that everybody makes money. So people start at the very bottom, and work their way up. And we've had people at the Nobus now for 15, 20 years, and some have become the managers of these operations. So there's a lot of promoting from within. But for young people, yes, we do have an internship program.
That's great. That tells a whole lot about the culture too of Nobu. No one's leaving, Drew, and they're happy, they're doing well, and they're not leaving. I heard one of you've had employees for the whole time since you've opened. That's amazing.
Well, I mean, I think for an operation to be successful, you have to make sure that everybody makes money. And that's the key thing. And I made a decision early on because I studied it. We've talked a little bit about tips, but you're not allowed to split the tips with cooks. But in the laws, they say if somebody's working at a counter, then they're allowed to be in the tip pool. So guess what? In 1994, when we opened Nobu, that's a sushi counter. And so the decision to put the sushi chefs in the tip pool was probably the number one best decision I ever made, because it allowed those people to make better wages. It allowed us to keep our overall payroll down. It allowed the waiters to make terrific money, but not insanely terrific money. And all the restaurants, carry forth. The only people you're not allowed to split tips with are management. And the definition of management is somebody who has the right to hire and fire, and somebody who's hiring, because then they have power over you. And if you don't, they can make these tip pools insane. The one thing I would point out also is you have to understand my generation. I'm 65, but the generation before me, they were awful to their staff. They treated their staff like dirt. And I saw all that. And I saw it in all the restaurants that I worked in. And I said to myself, I am not going to do that. And when I see somebody mistreating somebody, they talk about harassment or abuse. They talk about sexual harassment or abuse. It's not just sexual. Any kind of abuse, any kind of screaming and yelling. The Gordon Ramsay nonsense about, screaming and yelling like that. You cut it out. You don't allow it. And that doesn't mean that, when I'm not around every second, that somebody might not be doing that. And when it comes to our attention, we put a stop to it immediately. And we've had to release people who can't behave themselves. Yeah. But the reality is my generation of restaurateurs changed this thing for the better.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. As soon as you start to yell, you lose. And that's the name of the game. And I do remember that. And I remember getting knives thrown at me. Of course, not you, Chef Halloran, as I know you're here. But so, we have Rebecca, thank you. That's a great question. Let's go up to JC. Now, JC, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. He does have a culinary background. And he's in a couple of my classes, and he's also a cork dork. He's got the wine knowledge as well. So no pressure though, JC. No pressure at all, sir. So JC, go right ahead with Drew.
How you doing, Drew? Pleasure to meet you here. As he said, I do have a culinary arts background, and I am interested in transitioning from the restaurants to food and beverage manager at a hotel. What advice would you have for somebody like me in a situation like this that we're in right now in the world today, and for everybody else who has the same interest?
Yeah, I mean, the hotels are fantastic. Right now, there's just so much uncertainty, so it'd be hard to explain, where's the best place to be. But I was at the Super Bowl last year. Actually, I do an event at the Super Bowl called Taste of the NFL. And I'm trying to remember the name of the hotel, but the hotel, I think it was called the Diplomat. I do a lot of research, and the hotel had really excellent food and beverage outlets in the hotel. It's rare that you see like such hot, well-run breakfast places. They had an Asian restaurant, I'm going to draw a blank to the name, but he's a
No,
chef.
Delano, you're right. Actually, our researcher just pumped that. She says, oh, the Delano. So you're good. You're good. You're right on the beach.
No, not the Delano. That's in South.
Oh, the Diplomat Resort. Sorry.
I think it's the Diplomat. And then,
Thank you, Cindy.
so the overall experience. So now, if you're interested in the hotels can provide a certain security because most of the hotels are union. I don't know a lot about the union, but I know that their wages are usually much better than others. But the key thing is, I would say is, first of all, this generation, this is the greatest generation to learn. And how do I mean that? You can go online and you can get information about anything. So if you want to work in any hotel in America, you can go online and find out who the general manager is, what their outlets are, how many rooms they have. You can get a lot of information. But at the end of the day, and here's what I see, a lot of hotels are revolving doors. The GM comes in, comes out, food and beverage director, sometimes they have one, sometimes they don't. So Giancarlo, the thing is, I think stability in a hotel is very important. And I think, I try to, I seek out the general manager. Because the one thing about general managers, most of them don't know anything about food and beverage, but they have to posture that
they think they do, though. They think they do. Yeah, exactly.
They have to posture that they do. But when they see somebody who comes from an education in this field, who wants to work, wants to start working, that's the talent they want to attract, and that's the talent that they want to build. I've been in hotels. We actually were the first ones in the W in New York City on 49th Street. And I did the restaurants in the W, 49th, 39th Street, Icon. We helped them in San Francisco. I opened in Seattle, Earth and Ocean. So I have familiarity. The problem is it's a revolving door. And hotels, in a lot of cases, not every case, but in a lot of cases, they're like real estate plays. And right now, with the pandemic, I honestly, I think you're in a little bit of a difficult situation. When things settle down a little bit, are you graduating?
December, yes.
Oh, okay. December, huh? Well, and so do you live in Fort Lauderdale?
I live in Miami, in Doral.
Yeah, well, there's a great, there was a boom in Miami. Let's face it, even the Fontainebleau. You go in there, it's tremendous. I stay the Lowe's. The Lowe's is also really good. John Tisch is a terrific human being, and the Tisch family runs the Lowe's operations. They're so busy, it's unbelievable. And then there's smaller, the SLS, and there's a lot of good places in Miami. So if you want to stay on the hotel side, just do your research, do your homework.
That's great. Great advice, Drew. All right, JC, you got that one? That's how even I say that. Do your homework, would you? Sound familiar, Carlos de la Puente? Do your homework. All right. So we have one more question coming up, and I do want to also wrap up. I have one more question, but before we get to my last question, Drew, one of our graduate students, Lily, has a question for you. So far, Rebecca, JC, great questions. But Lily, let's hear from you.
Hi, Drew. My name is Ligia. I was born and raised in Brazil and moved to Miami a year ago to pursue my graduate studies in hospitality management. So I'm in the middle of a change of careers here, and also because of this pandemic and the whole situation in the hospitality business, I believe we're seeing a lot of technology being implemented in the business to help with the distancing, to help provide a better service, to decrease the human contact and interactions that we used to have in the industry. And I believe that this human factor is very, very important to the industry, and as service providers, the human factor is essential. So how do you feel about these replacements, that if this is a temporary thing, if some of those trends are here to stay, and if focusing on studying and understanding better technology could give us also a kind of a head start in the future? Because some of these technology solutions, they are also kind of tailor-made for the industry.
Hospitality is a strange thing because, whether it's the Four Seasons Hotel or, sometimes you go to a place and they're all over you. They're hello, 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 and they know your name, and and I'm one of those people. I kind of want to be left alone when I go to a hotel. When I go to a restaurant, I want to look at the menu, but I kind of want to order right away, and I don't need a very solicitous somebody on top of me all the time. I want what I want when I want it. I want somebody to be an eye shot. If I want my check, I can look at them and they bring the check. But really, the technology of what's happening, I fought against some things like online reservations, but now everyone books online. I liked when they called and you could speak to somebody, and that to me is the first moment of hospitality, to be honest. But I guess what I'm saying is, myself, the customer, I would entertain the technology to be left alone. In other words, if I sat down at a table and there was a menu there and I could press what I wanted and it went into the kitchen and somebody just brought the food and didn't say anything to me and I pressed a button to get the check, I'd probably be happy. So, but at the same time, it depends. It depends on the size of the restaurant. It depends on there's just not one fishbowl. That everything in our business sometimes is lumped together. But restaurants are, at the end of the day, you always know when you go to a restaurant if you're going to get personal service or if they're just going to, if they don't know who you are. And again, sometimes, I like to be known, like, just don't put me at any table and don't forget about me. And, but at the same time, I kind of like, efficiencies. So if the technology can speed up the efficiencies, I'm happy with that. I'm very happy with that. My first restaurant, I didn't even have a POS system. I had handwritten checks. There are people that are still listening to vinyl albums, although they're making a comeback too.
They are, yeah.
So I guess, what I would say to you is I would say definitely, as the technology becomes more efficient, you have to entertain it. You can't have a blind eye to it. But in hospitality, there is a moment in time when it's not real. In other words, they're being solicitous, but down deep, they really don't care. I think, the whole bottom line to hospitality is that when people care, you can feel it. And that's what you respond to. And I think that's when you become a regular customer at a certain restaurant. But listen, the one place in the world I want to go to is Brazil, but you have too much COVID. And you have an idiot.
Lily, that was a great question. So, Drew, I do have one more closing question with you. Before we get that, first of all, thank you for doing this. Thank you for your continuous support of the South Beach Food and Wine Festival. Every time we get to see you down there, or I get to see you and go, Drew, it makes me happy. So that's all well and good. So, and I tell you, man, I love your stories and I love your passion. And after, so many years you've been in the hustle, you still have this incredible passion. And it's just it's amazing for you to share it with the students. So my last closing question, what's next for Drew? I'm very curious. What's next for Drew? You've been at this game a long time, sir. I'm curious, what's next?
It's kind of funny because of the situation we're in now with the pandemic. It's hard to make a projection. I'm very happy reading a book. I find that in this period of time when we had to quarantine or stay away from people, and once you have a routine and you stick to the routine, it's actually pretty satisfying. I live in a beautiful house right on the Hudson River. I don't have a lot to prove to somebody. At the same time, I have great ideas. I always said when I was really opening places, I would have opened 20 more places if the rent had been cheaper. The problem was the landlords got greedy, the rent went up, and you said nickels and dimes before, you're 100% correct, and there was just no way you could make any money. And I'm not sure we can make money now. We certainly can't make money at 25%, so we're gonna have to wait and see. So I guess the answer to the question is the sky is the limit for all of us. If you have good ideas that you can put them to use. My next thing, honestly, would be I'm going to write a book.
Yeah.
And I want the book made into a movie so we can have some fun and we can ride off into the sunset.
There you go. You know, a couple guys in the movie industry, and I think that would be a phenomenal book.
Well,
I really do.
Honestly, we all live very interesting lives, but I think I've had a certain opportunity to see things that not a lot of people have that opportunity, and I like to share that.
Perfect. I love it. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, Drew, thank you very much for your time. We very much appreciate
Thanks
it.
a lot.
Well,
to all the students, thank you very much.
Absolutely. You got it.
Rocco, I love you. Giuseppe, I love you.
There you go, guys. All right. And on that note, we're out of here. We'll see you next time at Bacardi Talks.